Yeah. So he said, so, okay, I'm not sending it back, forget about it. Give it to him. Now he's gonna say,
This is Chovot HaLevavot. That's what I learned between Mincha and Ma'ariv every day.
fourth chapter.
Yeah.
But to have it in Spanish, I don't think it's very common.
So I get it, I'm about to learn it. So,
Or the Spanish man.
yeah,
You have two options, or give it away or learn Spanish.
yeah.
Well, it's Hebrew.
I'm giving it to him.
So, yeah, so he's fine.
Right. To get started in just a moment. Good morning, Wayne. Shavua Tov. How are things? How's life in Israel?
Good morning. Everything's great. We're on the top of the world.
That you are. We're on the bottom of the world.
It's kind of sad, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. You're all welcome to come here.
That's the plan. At the right time. Okay. So let's start it. The Sheila for today is Misha Matza Aveda Kishemachriz al Gabe Moda'a. So a person finds a lost item. So when he makes the announcement to try to find the owner, Ma Yitzayin al Gabe Hamoda'a. What should he write? Like what are the rules of Hachraza? The Kav Mazman Yesh Litlot et Hamoda'a Kedei Shahame'abed Yuchal Lirot et Hamoda'a. And how long does the sign have to be posted so that the person who's the owner will stand a good chance of retrieving his item? Tshuva, hamotze kishemachriz yesh lo lichtov et hachefetz shamatza. So first of all, you should write found jacket or found hat, whatever. Kigo nimtza beged o arnak o sikum kesef o tachshit misuyam. You say, I found a garment, I found a wallet, or I found a sum of money, or I found a piece of jewelry.
Yesterday, no? You found some coins in your tender.
It's not, someone just probably put them on my stender because it was Derech. Yeah, it could be.
You want to know if you're being
One of the
yes.
yes.
So maybe you're
It was Derech Hinuach. It was put down there deliberately because no one would put 85 cents on my stender for no reason, unless they felt that they owed it to me or something. I have no idea. Yeah, right. Anyway, Val Yadei Nitinat Simanim Yachzir Lama Abed. So you can't be too descript, you can't be too specific, because then he's not going to be able to provide a simon. So you have to give him, you have to write something that's vague enough that he'll be able to identify it with simanim. You have to hang it for a time that you can assume that anyone who's normally in this area will have seen it. And therefore, if after that time it falls off or it gets removed, you would not have to post it a second time. Okay, next. She'ela. Mahadin mitbarer lamotze mihu bal haveda deratza lahavi et haveda leba'alim. Okay, next shaila. What if the finder discovers who is the owner of the lost item and he wants to bring it to the owner? Can you just put it like the guy did with the change? He says, oh, I found something. Now, for example, did this guy fulfill his mitzvah by let's say another possibility is a guy found money. He found money somewhere in the base medrash. He says, well, I'll leave it on the Rav Shtender, let the Rav deal with it.
Yeah.
So is that sufficient? Is that sufficient? What if I'm a private citizen, I find an item, I think I know who it belongs to, I'm pretty sure I know, can I just leave it at his doorstep without telling him? Oh, tzarech lahodiyo al kach shiniach et avedoto b'makom zeh vazeh. Or is it sufficient for me to tell him I'm sorry, or do I have an obligation to inform him that I left your lost item? Or in other words, or can I just leave it there? So
I'm leaving it on his property.
This is
You go to the store, you knock on
he
the
just
door.
says, can I leave it in a place that's right? Yeah. Can I leave it in a place that's on the owner's property that I feel is protected? Is that sufficient? Or do I have to let him know? So the tshuva is, Im nitbarer lamotze miu bal haveda, yesh lahodio sheyavo lekachta, vein chiyav alamotze lahavia elav. So first of all, if you know who it is, you should inform him, come and pick it up. You have no obligation to return it to his house. He has to come to you. V'im hamotze ratza lahavia taveda leba'alim, yochel lahanicha b'makom shamor shebirshusam. If you wish to return it to them, you can leave it in a place that is protected on their property. V'im ha'be'alim omdim la'avor sham b'toch zman katzar. And if you know that the owner is going to find it when he gets home, meaning that it's only going to be a short amount of time until the guy finds it, you can put it in a place like the doorstep that isn't that protected because he said, you know, he's going to be back in 10 minutes. But if you leave it in that place and the owner's not going to get there for a long time, like let's say he's out of town for the weekend. So you can't, by leaving it at his doorstep, you're not really doing him a favor. If in the interim the item gets stolen, like the guy sees on his Ring doorbell that a guy with a hoodie came and stole the package, right? So then you'll have to pay him for that lost item. If I put something on your doorstep that I know is yours, and I don't tell you, or I know that you're going to be gone for an extended period of time, or let's say I don't know, I thought you were home, and I realize, oh no, that you're not. So I become chayiv on that object because my obligation was to watch that object for you until you come back, or until I could find you. And who's he quoting over here? He's let's see, Mishpat HaAveda, sefer called Mishpat HaAveda. Okay, fine. Next sheila. Misha hayaholech b'derech shel afar. A person was traveling on a dirt road. V'ra'a shenofel me'adam shehalach lefanav davar she'ein bo siman. And he notices that the guy, like they're part of a caravan, and the guy that's ahead of him, he sees he's dropped stuff, and it doesn't have a siman. Kagon matbeot shel kesef v'chayotze bazeh. Let's say I noticed some coins dropped out of his pocket. Mahadin kisharoa sha'oto adam hirgish badavar v'hitchil lechapes acher avedaso. So what will be the din if I see this guy he realizes that something dropped, and he's trying to find it? Ha'im hamotze chayiv lahachzir lo et avedato. Do I, as the finder, now have an obligation to tell him I have your lost item? Seems like a no-brainer, this question. I'm not even sure why this is a question. Maybe the
guy's not Jewish, Boston.
Well,
You seem to have that friend.
yeah, but
You still need to, you know that he lost it, you saw him.
He's not Jewish. There's no
Still,
Kiva Shabbos Aveda. You don't have the obligation.
so the other counter argument is even for a Jew. It's as if the item fell into the ocean or to the river. In other words, the argument that he's trying to make is that once someone's lost something that would normally be considered irretrievable because it's like finding a needle in a haystack, so then maybe you could say, even though I know it fell out of his pocket, I have no obligation to give it back to him. The Gemara gives an illustration of a guy who loses a valuable because it drops in the river. The Gemara says you can assume the person had yeyush immediately, and therefore if you find it downstream, even if you know that it fell from that guy because he told you he was going to be upstream, you have no obligation to return it to him because he had yeyush. He gave up hope. Now, can you go lifnim mishura sadin? Is there a virtue in going above and beyond the letter of the law? Sure. But There's no mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda in that situation. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. I guess that's the attitude. So what about in this case also? You see the guy's looking for it. So do you have an obligation to inform him? So the tshuva is mishara matbeot shenaflu mitoch chiso shel chavera o miplon litoch hakola betoch ha'afar v'nitale mimenu. If you see that coins fell out of a guy's pocket and they fell into the sand or into the dirt, and he can't find them, harezeh kenofel liyam olenahar. Then this is no different than if it fell into the ocean or the river. Technically, you're allowed to keep it because it has no siman, and it's no different from if it fell into the ocean. And even if you see that a guy brings a sieve and is very diligently trying to find where those coins are, we still say that in all likelihood he had yeush, and he's just trying, maybe he says I'll get lucky, but I probably have lost it. And you could also assume that the reason why the guy's bringing a sieve, the next day to find it is because maybe he's saying to himself, well, just like, I lost these things because there was a bump in the road and it made all my change fall out of my pocket. Maybe so the same thing happened to some other schlub and maybe I'll get lucky. So maybe this is like a gold mine of lost items. But you know for sure that he already had yeush from his own stuff. And this is codified in Shulchan Aruch, but obviously, and I'm disappointed that he doesn't say this, you should go lifnim mishuras hadin. The virtuous thing would be to go above and beyond the letter of the law. If you know that a guy, certainly if you see that he's upset about it, and even if he's not upset about it, if you know that it fell from his pocket, why wouldn't you want to give it back to him? And the asisa hatov v'hayasher, do that which is good and upright in the eyes of Hashem. Okay, next she'ela. Mahadin keshahachefetz haya biyad hashliach v'nevat miyado v'nisyayish hashliach milimso es hachefetz hayim nechshav yeush v'zacha bo hamotze. What if someone who's not the owner of the item is walking around with something, it falls out of his pocket, and you can assume that he had yeush by the time you find it, okay, or he put it down and then forgot about it. Does a shaliach, does a person who's not the owner, does his yeush mean anything, or do you need the owner's yeush? So the tshuva is yesh omrim she'en yeush moel ela kishabal hachefetz misyayish, aval shliach she'avad v'nisyayish eno yeush. So some say that you have to wait for the owner to have yeush. The person who's transporting it, his yeush is not sufficient. Next.
He's sufficient for everything else.
Correct. But in this case, since the owner still thinks that the item is secure, it's not considered to be yeush. It's yeush shalom midas. Okay. So mitzia b'cheder beit malon. What if you find something in a hotel room? She'ela. Misha sochar dira o shabali hitareach b'veit malon v'chayotze bazeh. So you go to a place, it's a hotel room or an Airbnb. Umatza b'toch cheder aveda she'en bo siman. And you find clearly this was not put there by the hotel. Maybe it's money under the bed. Maybe it's a body under the bed, and all these strange cases. Hayim zacha b'hamotze. Are you allowed to keep it? Oh, yesh lo liten lebal hadira o lebal hamala. Or do you have to surrender that item to the hotel, to the clerk at the hotel? Because maybe somebody who was previously there called and told the hotel, I lost some cash, or I lost an item. So the tshuva is misha sochar dira o sochar cheder le nofesh beveit malon v'chayotze bazeh umatza sham avedek shein bo siman. So in this kind of scenario, when it doesn't have a siman, tzarich litna lemishadar acharon bebayit o b'cheder zeh. So you have to find out who was the previous tenant of this room and give it to that person, because you have to assume that it came from that person. V'im yesh bo siman. So that's if it doesn't have a siman. Because if it doesn't have a siman, what about the fact that he may have had yeush? I guess maybe you don't know. Maybe because it was derech nefila, you have no way of knowing whether he had yeush or not. V'im yesh bo siman machlokas haposkim bazeh. If it has a siman, then there's a machlokas among the authorities. Yesh mi she'omer shechayiv lahachriz. The yesh mi she'omer she'yitin l'dayer ha'acharon shegarba demistama sheshachacha v'hi shalo. And some say you have to actually make a public announcement when you're not allowed to assume that it was the last tenant. And others say that you can just give it to the last tenant and you can rely on that assumption very easily. Let me just see. So he says, if something you find in a hotel room you can tell by the way that it is aged, that it's been there for a very long time, let's say it's become rusty, so then you're allowed to keep it. But if you find something in a rented room, so it seems like he quotes from the Rambam, says in Nimtzeis Aveda b'chatzer hamuskeres, if you find a lost item in a room that is rented out, a maskir zocheba, the landlord is allowed to keep it. Okay, but that's not pashut at all, and then he's quoting from in his footnote something that is contradictory to what he just said.
It's interesting that it says you don't have to give it to the owner of the hotel or anything like that.
Right.
You have to look for the owner or not risk, probably because there's an assumption that the hotel owner will probably keep it. Right.
Yeah, well, the question is, I check into the Marriott, okay, and I find some cash in the closet, right, or in the safe, So if I go to the front desk and I relinquish it, have I fulfilled my obligation? And if I haven't fulfilled my obligation and I ask the Marriott, who was the previous tenant of this hotel room? They're not going to tell me. There's privacy laws.
What do you do?
So,
Because the person in the front desk might just say, okay, I'll take care of it, you give it to them and they go shopping.
that's right. That's right.
Because that's your responsibility. Can't find.
So,
You're not accomplishing anything.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
problem.
So it would seem to me as additionally, they're not the owner of the hotel clerk. They're just an employee. So,
It's a public company also.
well, even a public company has rights to its assets, right? So the question is, how do you go about doing it? So one possibility would be, he's suggesting that you have to give it to the previous tenant, because you have to assume that it came from the previous tenant, with the exception, like he says in the footnote, if you can tell that it's been there for a long time.
Also, hotel owners make you sign, well, those implicit waivers, right? They're not responsible for lost or stolen items either. Right? So they kind of have waivers, it's like, we don't want anything to do with it. There's that too. Give it back to them. We've already said we're not responsible for them. So now.
So in this kind of situation, I probably would go to the front desk and ask them, has anyone called you saying that they left an item in this room? And if they say yes, well, so certainly if it has a siman, I would say, then you would have, and there's a good chance that it's a Jew, et cetera, et cetera. So I would think that you would have an obligation in that situation, if you know that someone is looking for their item, that you go to the front desk and inquire. Front desk, let's say, so the front desk says, yes, someone lost their sweater. Did you find it? So then, yes, is it okay if I give it to you? Probably the proper thing to do is if you can probably trust the front desk if they tell you yes. But let's say they tell you, no one's called for this, but we do have a lost and found if you'd like to leave it with us. The question is that sufficient? It would seem to me that that should be sufficient because you can also rely on the fact that maybe the person already had Yeush and you're just going with Mishur Sadin. So that's what I would do in a conventional hotel. Trying to find the identity is pretty futile.
I've left stuff in a hotel room.
So have I.
And I've called.
Yeah,
Get it back.
I left
Yeah,
the.
I did. I
wow.
actually left my film once. by
I once
accident.
left my laptop in a hotel room, and the hotel was able
And they
to
asked me
retrieve it.
Describe what it was. This was in Winnipeg.
Yeah,
It was kind of difficult to, it's like a blue velvet bag with,
and they
they
found
had
it.
And they FedExed it me to that day. I had it the next day.
Wow.
They're pretty strict with their employees, right? They'll
Yes,
say
they had caught, they
if they
fired,
take
they
stuff
take
and
stuff
stuff
and
and keep it, they're fired. It's generally pretty tough with them, so they were probably trying to give it to somebody, management.
So you see, if you go camping, you don't have to worry about those things.
They say, motion notes, just a rule of thumb is that nobody steals nothing. So you leave your whole camper and all stuff over the beach, leave it wide open. And 99% chance it's
I
not.
never had a problem.
Never, ever,
Your wallet, everything.
well, I wouldn't be
I
stealing
wouldn't
that.
put your wallet locked in your car.
Yeah,
You,
But
but,
I've never had any problem being stolen, my place, ever. That's the rule of thumb, just don't do it.
Yeah. It's because I'm not gonna make a joke.
Don't say
Yeah.
that.
Okay, all right. Next Sheila. Misha Matza mitkan lemechirat mashkaot kesef. Okay, you go to a vending machine and you find coins in the return in the vending machine. O b'mitkan shel hamikva shemishal shel metocho et hakesef. Or in it's not a vending machine, but let's say the mikvah box where people put money in. It doesn't make sense to me. Well, what would that? Okay, maybe there's like a pushka in the mikvah where normally you drop the money, the coins in, but these coins are found, I guess, right outside that pushka. Mitam hamikvah. So can you keep that money, or do you have to return it to the person who runs the vending machine, or the people who are in charge of the mikvah? Well, I see a very clear difference between a vending machine and the guys who are running the mikvah. If you find coins, let's say that clearly fell from the repository for coins that for people going to the mikvah, it would seem obvious that you have to put it back for the mikvah, because that's where it fell from. Someone probably paid and maybe the coins dropped out. But if a guy was buying a soda and forgot to take his change, so then why should the vendor be able to keep that?
it's not theirs.
These are totally different cases. In that case where there's coins left in the slot, it's probably because the guy just forgot to take his money. And so in all likelihood, there's Yeush by this point. So I'm not sure why he's.
When the vending machine takes your money, you let it take it, more money comes out.
Yeah, so those cases actually happen. There could be an obligation to return it.
That belongs to.
Because that belongs to the person who's selling the sodas, and it's just a malfunctioning machine. Okay. So he says as follows: Misha ba liknos eza mashka mi mechona shel mechirat shtiya. Person's going to a vending machine to buy a drink. Umatza b'mitkan shebo mishtalshel ha'odef letocho kesef. And so he finds in the slot, which gives you your change, he finds money. O kishabali hikanes lemikva umatza b'mitkan shemishtalshel ha'odef letocho kesef. Or he comes to the mikvah. It could be there's some mikvahs that have a change machine. I've never seen it, but it's conceivable. Have you ever seen a change machine in front of a mikvah? I don't know. So
I don't really hang it.
Maybe they have
Not my thing.
maybe they have a box with like where you keep your cell phone.
I don't know. Anyway, Zacha Bo Hamotze, he says you're allowed to keep it. It sounds like it's some kind of change machine in front of the mikvah. So he says, you're allowed to keep it. So he says, first he cites some of these sources, and he says, "V'nir b'mitkan hashtiya kishehichnis kesef liknot v'nivla hakesef lahotzi et hamashke hityosh v'holach lo." So in a case where like you put the coins in, and the money sort of gets lost in the machine, and you don't get your drink. So you like one scenario is I put the coins in, the machine didn't give me the soda. A guy, pressed the button, nothing happened. And so he gets upset and he leaves. And then later on, the Shamad Acharov Keshechnis as Akesef Kibel Odev, the Gamis as Kaspo Shal Oso Echad Shalo Kibel Ashtia Vakesef Nishar B'Miskan. Sometimes what happens is the next guy who comes along puts in his money, he gets his change and the change of the guy that put the money in previously. So therefore, he would be allowed to keep it in that situation. But Pashtus l'chor zocha hasheni b'kesev zeh. So clearly, the second guy gets to keep it because the first guy had yeush. Ela im kein oto adam shelo kibel hashtia kibel et kasmu mibal hamechona. Unless the first guy had gone to the person who runs the vending machine, said, "Hey, your machine ate my money; it didn't give me anything." And the vending guy who owns the vending machine gives him back the money. In that case, the second guy would have to give the change that came back to him back to the owner of the vending machine. The Shema Oto Adam Eno Darba Oto Makam Baholachlo. Because you don't know. Maybe the first guy never, doesn't live in the area, doesn't know the guy who runs the vending machine. So how is he supposed to get his money back? Unless it's like a vending machine in the yeshiva, where everyone knows that Yankel runs the vending machine. And so therefore everyone knows that he can always get in touch with the guy who runs the vending machine. So therefore, he says it may depend on the scenario. במקווה ציבורי שאינו שייך לאדם פרטי, לא שייך חילוק זה והכסף שייך לשני, ואינו צורך לחשוש שקיבל הראשון עשה עודף וצורך עיון. And with a public mikvah, where, you can say in all cases, the second guy gets to keep the change, because, there's no reason to assume that the first guy was able to get his money back from the mikvah. But he says it's not clear. I think you have to use your best judgment in these kinds of scenarios, because there's a lot of ambiguity depending upon the circumstances.
So in the case of a suffix, do we go l'chumra or there's a geneva?
Well, if it's a suffix geneva, so then you always have to be machmir. But when it comes to this mitzvah of hashavas aveda, we do allow a person to make assumptions. We do tell you, eyeball the situation and make your own conclusions. So it sounds like there's not a lot of room for suffix. But in a case where there's really ambiguity and you're really not sure, maybe the guy didn't have yesh, maybe the guy's going to come back and want to get his money. So then you should go, you should be machmir. Okay.
So what happens if like a vending machine at Mayor Sorrel and you're playing around with it, for some reason did the dial, you got a pop up, but you didn't pay for it? Is that stealing?
That is stealing, for sure. For sure, that's stealing. It does, and that's true even if the person who runs the vending machine is a non-Jew. You're stealing from them.
But what was the situation last week? I got a I went to get a parking ticket or to my dashboard. For some reason, there was already one there already, and the machine that said we didn't take it up for whatever reason. So was I wrong? Like take it, put on my dashboard, or I owe the city money?
No, you're not wrong for taking it, because if someone already paid for something and then left, he's had yeush on that cash value ticket, and so you're allowed to get it. You just got lucky. You just got lucky. Yeah, there's no reason that the city just wants to get paid for parking. It doesn't care whether you pay for it or somebody else pays for it, as long as someone's paying for it. Yeah. It's just like if you find the meter already has time on it.
Well, meters.
Okay. Okay, She'ela, Mahadin Kisharov Ha'ovrim V'Hashavim Ba'osamakom Hem Goyim. What if the majority of the people who pass through this area are non-Jews? Umatza Aveda Ba'oto Makam V'Vinyan Shekulam Yehudim. But you find a lost item in that place, but you find it in the lobby of a building which is completely Jewish, like the conservatory. Ha'im Zachaba Hamotze Kevin Sharov Oto Hamakom Hem Goyim, O Yesh Lo Lachris Kevin Shamatza Bevinyan Shel Yehudim. So do you go according to the majority of the inhabitants of the municipality or according to the majority of the people that are in that building? So you find something in a hotel lobby of an area that's mostly Jewish, but most of the people who live around the building are not Jewish. So who gauges it? So he says, Yesh Omrim Kishirov HaOmrim Be'oso Makom Hem Goyim Uvoso Makom Yesh Binyan Shel Yehudim Umatza B'chnisas HaBinyan O B'Malit HaBinyan Aveda Chayv Lahachar Kevin Shirov HaOmrim V'Ashavim Hem Yehudim. He says it all depends on who the majority of the passers-by of that place where it was found are. If the majority of the passers-by of that place are Jewish because the building is Jewish, so then you have the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, even if the majority of the city is not Jewish, that's fairly obvious. Okay, we'll hold it here for today. So as we're seeing going through all of these scenarios, there's a lot of gray area with the mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, and a person has to use his best estimate. Okay.